Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising books, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, as well as other fun, informative global cruise personalities. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests. If you hear about a cruise that interests you, book it at www.thejoyofacation.com or enter to win a free cruise for two. Again, www.thejoyofacation.com. We really appreciate your feedback, so leave us a text. Paul can't reply, but he may read your text on the air.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am delighted to welcome back Judi Cohen, travel writer extraordinaire, known in the cruise community as Traveling Judi. I feature Traveling Judi in my second cruising book, Cruising Interrupted, in a section called Cruisers Like You and Me, Sort Of, with a penchant for non-traditional, smaller, and even tiny ships relative to mainstream cruise ships. I met Judi through my association with Quirky Cruise online magazine, for whom she is a significant contributor. Traveling Judi was on the podcast a year and a half ago, episode 64, so it is good to catch up. From TravelingJudi.com, Judi has traveled the world in search of unique experiences and off-the-beaten-path destinations. She is also a connoisseur of small ship cruises that pack big adventure and local cultural and dining experiences. Judi became a full-time traveler and travel advisor in 2015, following her 35-year career in engineering and transportation. And today she writes about her experiences to inspire others to step outside their comfort zones and embrace new kinds of adventures. Judi has been to over 90 countries on 6 continents and enjoys sharing her stories along the way. Her training and experience as a health coach and as a travel advisor allows her to plan trips and seek out wellness destinations and experiences. Combined with her storytelling skills, she has become an accomplished travel writer, accredited by SATW, NATJA, and IFWTWA, and her work has been published on travel websites such as QuirkyCruise.com. She is also a board member on the Travel Media Association of Canada's National Board and Board Secretary. Welcome back, Judi, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here, Paul, with you.
Well, it's good to see you again. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Our family is growing, and we've got another grandchild on the way. So that's going to be a total of 4, and I can't wait. And busy as a one-armed paper hanger with traveling and writing and doing podcasts.
Well, I'm stuck on 2 grandkids. I love, there's nothing, well, listeners have heard me say before, there's nothing like being a grandparent. Well, it's good to see you again. Before we get into some really interesting things that you've been doing, share some background info for the listeners. Like you did before, where you're from, where you live, anything you would like to share.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. I am from Toronto, Canada. I spend about 6 months traveling every year, enjoying myself. I have come from a long career in engineering and construction, and then found my passion as Traveling Judi, traveling the world, actually initially as a travel advisor, and now as a travel writer and somewhat of an influencer online. That's what I have been up to, and I've been doing a lot of traveling on ships.
As I always do, especially for the sake of those aspiring cruisers who are listening, those who have never cruised before, let me first ask you to go way back and just say something about how and when you first got into cruising, because everyone's story is so different.
Okay. My first cruise was the one we did on our honeymoon almost 50 years ago. And we had bunk beds on a Chandris cruise ship. It was one of the larger cruise ships, not as large as them today, and we cruised from Rome to the Middle East, and we ended in Israel. That was my very first ship experience. My first small ship experience, however, was on Pinta Cruises, a tiny company that's based in Asia, Southeast Asia, and one that I continue to enjoy and travel with, and have taken my family and friends on many cruises there over the years. As a matter of fact, I've got one coming up with them in India that is going to be next year, early next year, to go to the backwaters of Kerala. But it's a wonderful company. And that's what really turned me on to small ship cruising.
Well, I tell you, your start in cruising was certainly atypical, pretty grandiose honeymoon cruise, even though not that many of us spent our honeymoon on bunk beds. But it certainly set the stage for just an amazing cruising career. We're not going to go all the way through it because I've covered it in a lot of detail in one of my books. I think you were in my second book, Cruising Interrupted, and I also covered a lot of your background on your first visit on the Joy of Cruising podcast. So I urge our listeners, if you missed that, to go back and listen to it. It's never a dull moment hearing about Judi's cruises. In fact, Judi turned me on to something that I didn't even know existed, and I've been writing about cruising for years and years, and that is Le Boat, a kind of a river cruise that you pilot yourself. And I was so fascinated by Judi's description of it that I got Le Boat to come on the show. So go back and listen to that. There's just so many stories, but we're going to jump right into Judi's latest cruise, not the one that's in the title, not the one that we're going to talk about some more later. But this is amazing because it's right here in the United States. So tell us about your latest cruise, Judi.
Okay, I just returned from a Great Lakes cruise in Canada and the United States.
Excuse me, I'm glad you corrected me.
Right? And we share the Great Lakes. Our two great countries share the Great Lakes.
See, I cut class that day in geography. When people say the Great Lakes, I automatically think of the U.S.
Well, there you go. And that's why taking a cruise like the one I just finished on Victory Cruise Lines aboard the Victory 2, we sailed from Chicago to Toronto. And that's why that cruise is a very important geography lesson, history lesson, and a lesson in how two nations have built an amazing cruise industry and shipping industry over the years.
Now, what was the capacity for that vessel?
The vessel accommodates 190 passengers, and we had about 109, 110 passengers on our inaugural sailing, which was wonderful. And at the beginning of inaugural sailing, they do a christening, a ship christening. And in this particular case, the ship was christened at Navy Pier in Chicago. And it was a wonderful ceremony with John Wagner as the CEO, and his granddaughter was the godmother, named the godmother of the Victory 2 ship. It was a really moving ceremony and a wonderful way to start an amazing journey.
Let me back you up a little bit. Say something about that cruise line. I'm not familiar.
So Victory Cruise Lines was around a few years ago, and it's gone through a number of changes. It was sold to another company that went bankrupt, and then John Wagner purchased two ships, the Victory 1 and the Victory 2, about a year ago, spent the last year restoring, renovating both ships and having them ready to sail earlier this month. And he did so. Both the Victory 1 and Victory 2 have been launched now, relaunched, I suppose you might say, in the Great Lakes, and are doing many journeys across the Great Lakes in both countries.
Tell us about your itinerary and kind of walk us through the ship and talk about the cruise.
Okay. Well, our cruise started, like I mentioned, in Chicago at Navy Pier. We cruised through, we stopped at 6 ports along the way, and then ended in Toronto. The ports that we were in included Mackinac Island, wonderful Mackinac Island with no cars allowed. It's only horses on that island. I don't know whether you have been there, Paul, but it's a magical place.
No, that sounds pretty fascinating. Now, again, I've already told you, I skipped geography class.
Okay.
Where is that?
Mackinac Island is in Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah. It's probably the far north point on the itinerary. But we did Mackinac Island, Escanaba in Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, Detroit, Sault Ste. Marie, and Port Colborne.
Wow.
Before arriving back in Toronto. And each one of those port stops had some marvelous excursions in them. Victory Cruise Lines includes one shore excursion, all of which were great, in each port. In addition to that, you can purchase premium or immersive excursions, which I did, and I really enjoyed. For instance, on Mackinac Island, the included excursion was a carriage ride, a horse carriage ride around the island and the visit to the fort. But then following that, I signed up for the premium excursion, which was lunch, a grand luncheon at the Grand Hotel, which is a historic hotel on the island with magnificent interiors and the longest porch in the world, if you can imagine. I also did one more I will mention, which was a real standout, an immersive excursion, was to the National Museum of the Great Lakes in Toledo, Ohio. A coach took us from the Port of Detroit to the museum in Toledo, Ohio, and we were able to board the James Schoonamaker Museum ship, where we had breakfast in the captain's dining room, and we did a full tour of the ship right into the belly of the ship, where you could see all the cargo is carried. And they don't carry completed cargo. On the Great Lakes, the freighters that you see plying the Great Lakes back and forth carry raw materials.
Mm-hmm.
They're not completed goods that you see in container ships, for instance.
Sure.
It's a fascinating world to learn about. I encourage you, Paul, to get up there.
Well, that actually sounds like a very, obviously very different itinerary, also a very educational itinerary. Now, all I know about Cleveland is from following sports, and over the years I've kind of been a big Cleveland fan. What does one do on an excursion on a stop in Cleveland?
On a stop in Cleveland, the first thing that you have to do is go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, absolutely.
You've heard of that.
It's on my bucket list to get to one day.
So one of the included excursions with Victory, is a visit to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it's a great way to spend a few hours. Then what I did was I booked one of the other excursions that took us to the mansion of one of the co-founders of Goodyear Tire. And it was magnificent. It was amazing to see the wealth and how it left very rapidly his hands. And now it's in the hands of a foundation, and they do operate tours there. So we were able to go and do a tour of the gardens and the house. It was fantastic.
So it sounds like on a couple of the port stops, you did both the included excursion and then an extra excursion. How long did you typically stay at port stop?
Port stops were typically a day. They were about a day. Sometimes we got there later in the morning. But what I wanted to do was see as much as I could. And we also had sea days, though. Like, I don't want you to misunderstand. The cruise itself was a relaxed pace. And there were 2 full sea days. I guess I should call them lake days, as we transited some of the lakes. But when we got to these ports, I suppose that I was eating with my eyes, because I looked at the offerings and all I wanted to do was see as much as I could in each place. And I'm glad that I did. But there were people on board. Some people never left the ship. Some people did one excursion only and, chose between the included and a premium or immersive excursion. But
Wow.
it's not a one size fits all. You can do anything that you want. And if you choose to stay on board for all or part of the day, you have got all kinds of programming. There's crafts that you can be working on, reading, lectures. There are some amazing lecturers on board. They're called Lake Lorians, and they're trained at the National Museum of the Great Lakes, able to give us really detailed information on the Great Lakes. You're put into a situation where you are learning. It's not by choice. It's just by being present and being there, hearing about it, seeing it.
Did these experts come on at the ports, or were they on the ship all along?
No, the Victory Cruise Lines has a partnership with the National Museum of the Great Lakes. The Lake Lorians stay on the ship from beginning to the end of the cruises.
Okay.
Lake Lorians on the Victory 1 and the Victory 2. Our Lake Lorian's name was Ian, and he was just an incredible wealth of information. There wasn't a question that he couldn't answer. And I found it fascinating listening to the stories about the freighters and the shipwrecks. On the Great Lakes, there are a number of shipwrecks. So we actually, by the way, we got to see at the National Museum a lifeboat and a life preserver from the Edmund Fitzgerald, which sunk 50 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an area that I definitely need to learn more about. The Great Lakes and river cruising in North America.
Right. So this is coastal cruising, and it's wonderful, and this is the perfect ship to do it. It's small. It's easy to learn. You don't need any deck plans or anything fancy about it. And the food, by the way, was probably the best food I've ever had on a small ship.
So say something about the food and accommodations on the ship.
Accommodations. Well, our accommodation was a balcony. It wasn't a balcony. It was a cabin on deck 4 that was accessed from the deck itself. And there were 2 chairs on the deck outside. The windows did not open, but our door did. It opened up to the outside deck. We had twin beds because I traveled with a friend, Sharon, on this trip. And the cabins are fairly small, 161 square feet, with bathroom. But the cabins are outfitted beautifully. There is luxury linens, sheets, towels, everything that you could need within those cabins was available. The cabins are maintained twice a day, in the morning, and then turn down service at night. It's just wonderful. Wonderful. It was just perfect. And there are cabins on board that are larger. And a couple have got balconies.
Now you alluded to the food. I can never hear enough about food.
Okay. So the food.
Turn us on. What was so good about it?
Well, not only was the food great, but the ambiance for dining was wonderful. There was the main dining room was called the coastal dining room, and it was more formal there. And by the way, what I loved is that all of the meals were laid out as you walked through the foyer into the dining room. They had prepared a sample of every dish that you could order as part of that evening service. So you walked in and you could see what the food looked like. By the time you sat down and the waiter came over, you knew precisely what you wanted based on what you saw. I thought it was brilliant doing that. And I could also see what I didn't have and what I might have tomorrow if it was still available. The dining room on the top, it's got windows, panoramic windows all around it. It was almost like you were eating al fresco. When the windows were open, it felt like you were dining al fresco.
Mm-hmm.
We had quite cool weather, though, I must say. I mean, early spring is not necessarily the best time to be up north, but there's less crowds. But, it was wonderful. And the meals, I mean, everything from fish to seafood to meats, vegetarian meals were all available. They were prepared beautifully and with real great precision. It was as if I was eating in a gourmet dining room or restaurant every night and every day.
Did they have, I know some small chefs occasionally have like a specialty restaurant or a chef's table. Did they have anything like that?
We'll be right back.
Do you have a dream car? Mine is the Lucid Air. Are you intrigued by electric vehicles? The Lucid Air EV has been called the best driving car in the world. And the Lucid Air Sapphire is certifiably the fastest production car in the world. Listen to Lucid Driver Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts or at luciddriver.buzzsprout.com.
Yes, they had on this ship, the dining room that I described was called the grill upstairs, the one with the panoramic windows. At night, it's converted into their I'll say, nicer room with specialty menu. And it was called the Tuscan Grill, Tuscan Stone Grill, where we got to cook all of our meat and fish and seafood on a stone, on a hot lava stone that was placed in front of us. And then the waiters came over and offered the sides once our main courses were cooked to our satisfaction. They came and offered us our sides. It was a beautiful way of being served and a very memorable meal. I particularly love the lamb chops, which I cook to my liking.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's difficult to get lamb chops cooked the way you like it. When you're cooking them on your own, you can just do it. And they knock it right out of the park in that Tuscan Stone Grill in the evenings. You do not have to pay, by the way, to dine in the specialty restaurant, but you do need to make reservations because it's relatively small.
That sounds amazing. I've only done one. I did a river cruise. That's been the smallest ship that I've been on, and then I went on another ship, which is small to me, but I'm sure not to you. It was like 600 people, Explorer Journeys. A river cruise, or I guess you call it a coastal cruise, right here in North America. That sounds like something I want to try.
And I want to try the Explorer Journey, even though it's a larger ship. That must have been fabulous, Paul.
Oh, it was. My first comment when we did our podcast reflections on it was, it is going to be very difficult for me to get on any other cruise ship. Now, not really. Doesn't take much to get me on a cruise ship, but it's going to be hard to compare to the experience that I had on Explorer. It was just fabulous. And even though it was, like I said, large for you, 600, didn't seem that way. I think the whole 10 days or so we were on the ship, we were maybe once or twice there was someone else on an elevator with us, so you could just.
Yeah. Well, Paul, I know you want to get talking about some other things, but I have to tell you that sometimes the size of the ship doesn't matter as much as how you feel on the ship. And I have found that being on, for instance, Viking's ocean ships. I just came also off of Viking Jupiter on a trip from Barcelona all the way up to Bergen. It was a 15-day trip, 385 guests. I never felt like I was on a bigger ship for me at all. And I loved every minute of it. There were many private spaces that made it feel like a small ship. The little nooks. I never felt crowded. I would never describe it as a big ship.
Now, sometime it's been well over a year since you've been on, and I recall sometime in the past year and a half, you indicated, I think on Facebook, that you were going on a mainstream ship. And I think you were asking for recommendations. I'm not sure because I seem to remember offering a recommendation. What was the circumstances to get you on a large ship, and what did you end up choosing?
Well, I wanted to do a girls' getaway, my sister-in-law and I, and we had a ship that was going to be a lot of fun and different than anything that I had done before. And so we ended up on Princess in Alaska.
Okay.
And it was brilliant. It was so different. It had 3,800 guests, some 3,800 guests on it, radically different than anything.
Which princess ship was that?
Pardon?
Which princess was that?
It was the Princess. It was give me one of the names of the princess.
The newest one is the Sun Princess.
No, it wasn't
There's the Star. No, the Star Princess is brand new.
I'm going to have to get it to you, but it was.
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful ship. It wasn't the most newest ship as far as I know, but we loved every second of it. I loved the activity. I loved the sail away and the pool and the action around the pool. I also really enjoyed the meals and the excursions there as well. We booked all kinds of excursions. You know, Paul, that I love adventure. So I was able to book a helicopter ride up to one of the glaciers to go dog sledding. I was able to book seaplanes.
Wow.
And I did everything that I could have ever imagined and wanted to do off the ship, and that much and more on the ship. So
was that your first helicopter excursion?
No, I love helicopters. I have done many helicopter excursions all around the world, but that was an outstanding excursion. Outstanding.
Since we last spoke, we went to Alaska for the first and only time, but we're definitely going back. And quite surprisingly, on the plane home, my wife, she heard everybody talking about various excursions they had going on, and she expressed a willingness to go on a helicopter excursion, which I never even broached to her because I figured there's no way she would want to do that. But she expressed a willingness to do it, and so that's one thing that we're definitely going to go back to Alaska, and a helicopter excursion is on our bucket list. We've never done one.
I think you should do one, and it was called the Discovery Princess, by the way.
Discovery Princess, okay.
I would encourage you to do a helicopter ride. They're typically fairly short, so you need to get yourself positioned and be willing and able and ready to take it all in. As soon as the helicopter lifts off, there's no time. It lifts off, it gets you up there very quickly, and you're done before you know it. But it's very worthwhile. You should do it.
Well, let's talk about Galapagos.
Okay.
Probably the most mentioned bucket list destination when I ask guests what's on their bucket list, and I know you have some particular thoughts about the phrase bucket list. We'll talk about that later. But when I ask, and I've interviewed hundreds, and many people are very much veteran cruisers like yourself. But then I've interviewed, newbies and then people in between, sort of like me. But I always ask people their bucket lists, and that's particularly of the veterans. They tend to mention Galapagos. Talk about your itinerary.
So, first of all, I did it with a company called Metropolitan Touring. They are based in Ecuador, a small company, and I did it aboard La Pinta, tiny ship, carries no more than 100 passengers, and the number of people allowed to go on shore is 20 per guide. So you want to guide yourself accordingly in terms of your selection of ships. I'm trying to look up how many passengers were on this ship that we did, but there were not many. There might have been 30 on our.
Wow.
Might have been. And we did a number of islands. We visited the islands of North Seymour, Isabella, Rabida, Santa Cruz, and Floriana. And each one of those islands has its own personality. I tell you, Paul,
Judi, with those islands that you just mentioned, do they collectively make up what we hear of as the Galapagos?
Yes.
Okay.
Galapagos Islands is a whole series of islands. Some have vegetation, certain vegetation. Some have certain types of wildlife. They are not all the same. They're small microcosms, even. Okay, and that's why Charles Darwin did a lot of research there, trying to understand why a certain type of tortoise could exist on one island, but it didn't exist on the next island. So it was a very interesting trip. I kind of held off on the Galapagos because I thought it was a trip that I would like to do with my grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
It's one that they do host a lot of families and younger people on those trips. Because again, it's an enrichment trip. It's one where you just learn so much. You're in situ. You are right there. And there's so much to learn in the Galapagos about the wildlife, about the vegetation, about breeding and preservation. So it was a fantastic journey, and it was an expedition. So it's a little bit more difficult than some of the other cruises. It's a bit like some of the Antarctic expeditions that I've done and the Arctic ones that I've done, where you were on the ship and then you get outfitted and you leave the ship by Zodiac. So you are constantly on one of the rubber Zodiacs, doing excursions. You can go snorkeling, you can go swimming. On our ship, there was no diving, but there are people who would dive in the Galapagos. It was a very enriching journey, and it's a place that I do want to go back to now. Like I'm hoping that when my grandchildren get old enough and I may still able to travel, that I will be able to take them back there, because I think everybody needs to see the Galapagos at least.
There were only, you said, approximately 30 people on the ship?
Yeah, approximately.
What was the composition? I mean, did everyone on the ship get off and do it? Were they all adventurous, or some were just there for the cruise?
Everybody got off of the ship. Everybody wanted to be off of the ship and doing things and being as active as they could be. I just found out the capacity of the ship that I was on was 48 passengers. And we had just 24 on our sail.
Oh, okay.
So it was very, very small. I knew it was somewhere around 30, but It was 24 guests. And so first of all, we got to know everybody very quickly. And it was a real cross section. The oldest person on our ship was in his 80s, well into his 80s, and did all of the activities. So don't think that age is a barrier.
I take it there were no kids.
There were no kids on our sail. There were no kids. I went at a time of year where there were no kids. But usually there are kids. And we saw a lot of children when we were there coming off of some of the other ships.
This would be considered an expedition cruise, if I understand you correctly. How long was it?
1 week.
1 week?
Yes, it was six nights, 7 days. But because of the time that it takes to get there from North America, it's the same time zone essentially, but you still have to fly there, go through Ecuador, either Quito or Guayaquil, and then get out to one of the islands to get on La Pinta. So there's a bit of logistics to get yourself there and back. But it's well worth it. It really is just not a vacation. It's a call to action. It's about the beauty of the islands and the importance in terms of conservation and responsible tourism in the region. So
now, when I ask guests about expedition cruises, and I say, well, talk about the vessel, they usually are off the vessel as much as they are on the vessel. You know, it just seems like expedition is all about exploring the destination. But say something about La Pinta.
Well, so La Pinta is the same thing, okay? It's the same type of thing. It's beautiful. The accommodations were beautiful on it. All the cabins have got windows. It was lovely. But you're right. On an expedition cruise, you're there to explore the destination. So it is about being off the ship and in destination. However, you are on the ship. I mean, you are sleeping on the ship. So you want to make sure your sleeping accommodations are great and the food is great as well, because that really gives you the energy to go out and do the kind of exploration you want to do during the day. But yes, we were off the ship in the morning and we were off the ship in the afternoon. And we looked forward to all of those times off the ship, even suiting up. I mean, in a warm weather climate, you're not putting on big, heavy coats and boots. But here you put on your life jacket and you want to put on a shirt to block you from the sun and your hat. And it's just a great way to travel. It's a great way to see the beauty of the world in a very simple way.
Is La Pinta relatively new?
La Pinta is relatively new. I don't have the exact date that it was from. But it feels very new. When you're on La Pinta, it feels new. It's shiny. It's lovely. It's not shiny like the new cruise ships. It doesn't have casinos and 25 dining rooms. It has one dining room that everybody eats in. But like I say, the cabins were lovely. They were clean. Everything about it was wonderful.
When I hear people say, you know, when I ask people what's on your bucket list and they say Galapagos, I suspect I want to go to Galapagos, but I'm not real sure why. You know, it's just that it sounds like so many veteran travelers have that on their bucket list, so it must be special. What can listeners expect to realize, to see when they go to Galapagos?
Galapagos is nature at its best. It is the best wildlife experience that I've had in the world because it is so rich with wildlife. Everywhere you turn, there is something to see. There are giant iguanas. There's sea tortoises and there's land tortoises. The big giant tortoises that you've probably seen photographs of, That unto itself is worth the trip to the Galapagos. There's only two places in the world you can see those tortoises. There and in the Seychelles. I think it's the Seychelles, could be Maldives, but it is definitely a worthwhile place to go, and everybody should see it, and you should put it on your list of must-sees.
Forgive me if this is a naive question, Judi, but I frankly just, I don't know. When you get off the vessel in Galapagos and you see all of this wonderful nature, flora, animals, do you see people besides those on your vessel?
Nope, you don't see people. There's people who live
Okay.
on a couple of the islands. Santa Cruz is one of them. But other than that, it is just the land and the animals that are there, the wildlife that is there.
So no develop. I mean, there's to say when in Galapagos we went to this restaurant. That's just a
It's a
non-statement.
non-statement. You would have gone to a restaurant on Santa Cruz Island, which is where a lot of the ships start their services, okay, or stop. But that is a community, and there is a small community on Santa Cruz where there are nice restaurants, and you can hear stories about having great dining experiences. We overnighted in a hotel in Santa Cruz that I loved, and we
Oh,
had
okay.
meals there.
Okay.
But then we were transferred over to another island to get on the ship. The island is where the airport is.
Let's talk about the future, Judi. What do you have booked?
What do I have booked? Oh my goodness. Well, I've got a number of upcoming trips now. I'm going on the Uniworld SS Beatrice from Budapest to Nuremberg. It's a small river cruise that I'm looking forward to, and that's going to be in just a few weeks. And then after that, I'm doing 3 cruises in a row, back to back to back. So Uniworld Beatrice, and then I'm flying up to Scotland to do the Hebridean Princess in Scotland, in the islands. And then I'm flying back down to Malta and over to Thessaloniki in Greece to get on Crystal Cruises anniversary trip that ends in Rome. So that will all end by late in July. So my entire month of I'm going to be gone for an entire month doing these 3 cruises, and then I'm back because then I'm expecting my 4th grandchild. So I will not travel until that baby is born, and probably for some time after that.
Now, Crystal Cruises, is this your first time on the Reborn Crystal?
This is my first time on the Reborn. I was on the Crystal Serenity previously, and I am looking forward to the new Crystal. Have you been on Crystal, Paul?
No.
So I too would like to see what the changes are on Crystal since it's been relaunched. I've heard very good things about it. I can't imagine that there would be anything terrible.
Now, are you going to go on what was the Serenity?
Yeah.
Just an aside about Crystal, someone was telling me that they went on Crystal, the old iteration of Crystal, and they went on a new iteration of Crystal, and certain staffers called them by name.
Oh, no kidding.
Years, I mean, literally years later, and someone called them by name.
That is amazing. I mean, first of all, it's amazing that those particular staff might still be there, right? That's unbelievable in this day and age.
Yeah, I heard they reached out to everyone. They reached out to all of them to come back. I did hear that.
Phenomenal. And they came back, which says a lot.
Yep.
They came back. That speaks volumes about a cruise line and their ethics and their management style. Yeah.
I read a little bit about Crystal because I had this bucket list item to try a luxury cruise. They were all a little bit too rich for my blood, but then I heard a really interesting story about Explorer Journeys, and that's how I ended up on Explorer Journeys.
Yeah, well, that one is one that I would love to try. I mean, definitely. But you know what, Paul? You know what I'd like to ask you?
Sure.
I'm busy traveling, and I'm going to have a lot of time to write. Where do you know where your listeners, apart from your podcast, where do they get their best information about small ship cruising and cruising? Because I'd like to write for those people. I mean, I would like to write the stories to tell about my travel tales in places that people like to get their information from.
Well, of course, you're already a fixture at Quirky Cruise. Another place there's a new podcast. Do you know? Are you familiar with Sometimes Sailing?
Yeah, I
Yeah, so they have started a new podcast. Unfortunately, I don't quite remember the name of the podcast, but it's by the creators of Sometimes
right,
Sailing, and it is solely about small ship cruising.
right. Well, that's great.
You know,
Yeah, I know
I
that.
don't I don't know if they're doing guests yet, but if they're not, they should have you. I mean, you would be absolutely perfect for Mikhail and Dan, and in fact, I'll send them a text that and tell them that I shouted them out on this show,
Right.
even though I forgot the name of their podcast,
Okay.
and that they should talk to you because I don't know anyone who is more into the world of small ship and tiny ship cruising.
Yeah.
What's the smallest ship you've been on, Judy?
Smallest is a barge cruise that I did in France on the Canal de Midi, and there were seven of us. It was a capacity of eight, but we had seven guests on that tiny barge. The other small one are the houseboats. You mentioned the boat.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we've done a boat with just three guests and a dog. My husband, myself, my daughter, and our dog.
Yeah, I had you on for the houseboat story, but I haven't. We didn't talk about the barge either in the book or the last time you were on. So we're going to have you back on in a year or so because I want to hear your reflections of Crystal. Or all of your cruises are amazing because and they're very different than what I and most of my listeners are used to. So I can assure the listeners we will have Judi back on if Judi will be back on. Sometime after you do this swing of three straight cruises, and you can tell us about that beautiful grandbaby of yours.
All right. And I can tell you about packing for three back-to-back cruises.
Yeah, yeah. I've got two back to back coming up, but I've never done three. All I know is when I kind of confirm with my wife about the two, she doesn't. She's not as much. You've heard me say she's not as much into cruising as I am, and she just kind of rolled her eyes and said, "All of that water," because we're going to be on the water for much of a month coming up later this year.
Hey,
I know not to ask you what's on your cruise and travel bucket list. I have some history with Judi on bucket lists, and I'm not gonna go through all of it. You can read the Cruising Interrupted, but I know that you don't call it a bucket list, and you're more about turning your dreams into memories every day. So what dreams are you looking to turn into memories?
well, I want to do some family cruising. I want to find some cruising where I can do it with my children and grandchildren. So that's going to be a bit of a change. But I'm going to be searching out opportunities to do that and share those stories as multi-gen cruisers. How do we make the best of that? Um, on my personal list, I would like to still go back to Antarctica. I would like to,
Again?
yes, that would be make it number 5, and I would love to go back to Antarctica just because I can, because I physically am still able to do it. So I want to make sure that I do all of the traveling right now before I lose the ability to do it one way or another. So it's those kinds of trips that require mobility that I want to be doing. Because I got to face it, I'm in my 70s now, and time changes our capacity to do things. So I can't name the specific ones, but I can tell you that they will all be active cruises at this point.
Mm-hmm. Hey, before I move on from the future, you got any big writing projects coming up that you want to point us to?
Well, I'm doing a lot of writing for Canadian World Traveler magazine and World Traveler magazine, which is the American version of it. A lot of stories there, and writing for all things cruise. And like I say, I'm really looking for some more outlets and possibly developing my own website, which I have. It's travelingjudi.com website. And that's really, right now, it's where I place all of my stories. But for me, it's really important to share the information as much as I can. Yeah.
Well, Judi, before we let you go, as you know, we like to close with some light, even fun questions. And let me preface by welcoming the Traveling Judi fans and friends listening, so that your fans and friends and my listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Let me ask a few questions I like to ask repeat guests. So tell our listeners and your friends, how do you spend your me time?
With my grandkids. I spend a lot of time with my grandkids, every minute that I can get. As long as they want me, I'm willing to give my time to them.
Now, let me see if I got this right. I know you're in Toronto.
Right.
Some are in New York, right? Manhattan?
Yeah.
Okay. All three in Manhattan?
2 are in Manhattan, 1 is in Toronto, and another one is coming in Toronto as well.
Okay. Okay.
So I split my time between Toronto and Manhattan and try to get everyone together as much as I can. And that's why also my future cruise plans are to have everybody together so that all of the kids can be together.
What are you listening to right now in terms of music or podcasts or audio books?
Well, lately I've been listening to a lot of Bob Dylan, believe it or not. I saw the new movie on.
I was just getting ready to ask, have you seen the movie?
I have, and I loved it. Not only have I seen it, I watched the same damn movie twice on the same plane ride. Okay? And then I watched it again at home, and I just loved the story. Things that I never knew about before. So I listened to that. I listened to a lot of Johnny Cash. I'm a country girl, so I love Johnny Cash. And even the connections between Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan were very cool.
What about live events? What's the last live performance you attended?
Okay, do you remember the band Genesis?
Sure.
Okay, well, I went just on Saturday night, 2 nights ago, to a concert. It's called The Musical Box. And they are a band that recreate the old Genesis concerts, live concerts, the T. And it was wonderful. It was as much theatrics as it was music, but I saw them in Toronto at the Danforth Music Hall. It was absolutely genius how they did that. And I always loved Genesis.
How about television and movies? Anything to turn my listeners on to?
Television and movies. Let me think about this. I don't watch a lot of TV. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't watch a lot of TV.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I watch YouTube.
Yeah. I watch some YouTube, but I just don't have time for television, and I avoid the news like the plague right now. I don't want to read it. I don't want to see it. And it brings me down, and I don't need downers in my life.
Yeah, YouTube is kind of filling a void because I was a television news junkie. I didn't watch shows, but I watched news, and now I can't watch it. I can't watch anything. And so, you know, I just watch cruising videos
Good for you.
around the clock.
You see, and that's good because that keeps you, first of all, it keeps you informed, but it also is entertaining, unlike a lot of the other things that you can see these days. So, yeah, I'm with you, Paul, on that.
Do you have a favorite movie of all time?
Of all time, Casablanca. I mean, my favorite movie of all time was Casablanca. Of course, it would have to be a movie set in another country, but yeah, it was very romantic and loved it.
Who can argue with that? Judi, it is so good to see you again. Thank you for coming back on the Jura Cruising Podcast. And as I said earlier, I'm sure we'll have you back if you will be back. All the best and good luck with that new grandbaby.
Thank you.
And as I like to say, we'll see you on the ocean.
Thanks, Paul.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99 can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.